I've been carrying this around for 7 days now, replaying every single word, every pause, every moment where our eyes met and held just a fraction longer than necessary. He told me yesterday that he'd been thinking about our conversation all week. Those 3 words hit me like a wave I wasn't prepared for, and suddenly I'm back in that coffee shop, my hands wrapped around a cup that had gone cold 20 minutes earlier because I couldn't stop listening to him talk. Let me back up. His name is Marcus, and we work in the same building but different companies. One of those situations where you see someone regularly enough that you start to notice patterns. He gets his coffee at 10:15 every Tuesday and Thursday. He always orders the same thing, an Americano with just a splash of oat milk. He has this way of running his hand through his hair when he's thinking, and I've probably spent more time than I should admit watching him do exactly that while he waits for his order. For months, we existed in this comfortable space of polite nods and brief smiles, the kind of acknowledgement you give someone when you're both regulars somewhere. Safe, uncomplicated. I convinced myself I was fine with that it was enough to just have these small moments of connection, even if they never went anywhere deeper. Then, 3 weeks ago, everything shifted. I was having the worst day, the kind where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. My presentation had crashed during a client meeting, I'd spilled coffee on my only clean shirt, and I'd gotten an email from my ex that dredged up feelings I thought I'd processed months ago. I was sitting in that same coffee shop, probably looking like I was trying to solve world hunger with the intensity I was staring at my laptop screen when I heard his voice. "Can I sit here? The place is packed." I looked up, and there he was, Marcus, holding his Americano and gesturing to the empty chair across from me. The coffee shop wasn't actually that crowded. I noticed that immediately. There were at least 3 other empty tables, but I nodded, moved my bag off the chair, and tried to pretend my heart wasn't suddenly doing gymnastics in my chest. We sat in silence for maybe 2 minutes. I was acutely aware of every sound, the clicking of my keyboard, the way he stirred his coffee even though he'd barely added anything to it, the ambient noise of the cafe that somehow felt louder than usual. Then he spoke again. "Rough day." His voice was gentle, curious, but not prying. I looked up, and he was watching me with these eyes that seemed genuinely interested in the answer. Not the polite interest you give a stranger, but real interest, the kind that makes you feel seen. I laughed, and it came out more bitter than I intended. You could say that. The words opened something in me, and before I knew it, I was telling him everything. Not the surface-level stuff, but the real things. How I'd been feeling stuck in my job for months, but was too scared to make a change. How my last relationship had ended because I was too afraid to be vulnerable, and now I was realizing I was still doing the same thing, keeping everyone at arm's length. How some days I felt like I was performing a version of myself rather than actually living. He listened, really listened. Not the kind of listening where someone is just waiting for their turn to talk, but the kind where you can tell they're actually taking in every word, holding it, considering it. When I finally stopped talking, probably 15 minutes later, I felt embarrassed. I'd just unloaded on this guy I barely knew, this person I'd been quietly admiring from a distance for months, and I'd gone and made it weird. But Marcus didn't look uncomfortable. He leaned back in his chair, took a sip of his coffee, and said something I wasn't expecting. "I get it, the performance thing. I feel like I've been doing that my whole life." That's when the real conversation started. He told me about growing up in a small town where being different meant being invisible or being a target, and he chose invisible. How he'd gotten so good at performing the version of himself that everyone expected that sometimes he forgot what the real version even looked like. How he'd moved to the city 3 years ago hoping to find himself, but instead found new ways to hide, different costumes for different audiences. We talked for 2 hours. The coffee shop staff started cleaning up around us, giving us those polite looks that say we're closing soon, and we barely noticed. When we finally left, standing outside on the sidewalk as the sun set and painted everything in shades of orange and pink, there was this moment, this pause where neither of us wanted to walk away, but neither of us knew what to say next. He broke the silence first. This was really nice. We should do it again sometime. I agreed, gave him my number, and we went our separate ways. I walked home feeling lighter than I had in months, but also terrified. Terrified because I'd let someone see parts of me I usually kept locked away. Terrified because I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me when I was talking, like I was saying something that mattered. The next week was strange. I kept checking my phone, wondering if he'd text, wondering if I should text first, playing out a dozen different scenarios in my head. Tuesday came and I went to the coffee shop at my usual time, but he wasn't there. Thursday, same thing. I told myself it was fine, that maybe I'd read too much into it, that it was just a nice conversation between two people and nothing more. Then Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was him. "Hey, sorry I've been MIA this week. Work has been insane. But I wanted to tell you something. I've been thinking about our conversation. Like, a lot. Would you want to grab dinner this weekend? Actual dinner, not just coffee." I must have read that message 20 times, analyzing every word, every piece of punctuation. He'd been thinking about our conversation, not just remembering it, but actively thinking about it. There's a difference, right? Remembering is passive. Thinking is active. It means he was turning it over in his mind, considering it from different angles, maybe wondering about me the way I'd been wondering about him. I said yes to dinner. Obviously, I said yes. But then I spent the next day and a half in a mild panic about what to wear, what to say, how to be. All those patterns of performing that we'd talked about came rushing back. I caught myself in the mirror Saturday afternoon, trying on my fourth outfit, and I had to laugh at the irony. Here I was, getting ready for a date with someone I'd bonded with over the exhaustion of performing, and I was doing exactly that. So I stopped. I put on jeans and a sweater that I actually felt comfortable in. I didn't overthink my hair. I decided that if this was going to be something, anything, it had to start with me being real, the messy, uncertain, sometimes scared version of me that I'd shown him in the coffee shop. Dinner was at this small Italian place in his neighborhood, the kind of restaurant where the owner knows half the customers by name and the menu is handwritten on a chalkboard. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, and when he saw me walk in, his whole face lit up. That smile, genuine and warm and just for me, made every anxious thought I'd had dissolve. We fell into conversation as easily as we had before. He told me about his week, a project at work that was consuming all his energy, a phone call with his mom where she'd asked again when he was going to settle down. I told him about finally having the conversation with my boss about feeling stuck, how it hadn't solved anything, but at least I'd said it out loud. We talked about movies and music and the books we'd been meaning to read but never got around to. Surface stuff, but it didn't feel surface. Everything felt like it meant something. Halfway through the meal, he put down his fork and looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Serious but soft. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. I nodded, my heart picking up speed. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about what you said. About performing versus living. It's been in my head all week. Every time I catch myself putting on an act, I think about that conversation, about you, about me." Those two words hung in the air between us. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. He continued, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable. "I've been on a lot of dates in this city. A lot of first dates that never became second dates because I was so busy being what I thought the other person wanted that I forgot to be myself. But that day in the coffee shop, I wasn't performing. I was just me, and you were just you. And it felt, I don't know, it felt real in a way nothing has felt in a long time. My throat felt tight. I reached across the table and my hand found his, and he looked surprised for just a second before his fingers wrapped around mine. I feel it too, I told him. This, whatever this is, it scares me because it feels important. Like if I mess it up, I'm not just losing a date or a potential relationship. I'm losing something I didn't even know I was looking for. He squeezed my hand. What if we just agree not to mess it up? What if we just agree to keep being real with each other, even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. It sounded so simple when he said it. So obvious. But simple doesn't mean easy, and we both knew that. Still sitting there with my hand in his, looking into eyes that felt like home even though I'd only really known him for a week. I wanted to believe it was possible. We stayed at that restaurant until they literally started putting chairs up on tables. Then we walked. Nowhere in particular, just wandering through his neighborhood as the city settled into its nighttime rhythm. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about the first time he came out to his best friend in college, and how terrified he'd been. I told him about my family, how supportive they were in theory, but how I still felt like I was translating myself whenever I talked to them. At some point, we ended up in a small park, sitting on a bench under a streetlight. The air was cold enough that I could see our breath, and without thinking about it, I moved closer to him. He put his arm around me, and I leaned into his warmth. We sat like that in silence for a while, just existing together, and it felt more intimate than anything I'd experienced in years. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned to look at him close enough that I could count the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, and instead of answering, I closed the distance between us. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then it deepened, became more certain, and I felt something in my chest crack open. Not break, but open. Like a door I'd been keeping locked was finally letting light in. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine and laughed, this quiet, amazed sound. "I've been wanting to do that since the coffee shop," he admitted. I laughed too, because same, obviously same. We kissed again, and this time it felt less like a question and more like an answer. That was last night. This morning I woke up to a text from him. "Good morning. Just wanted you to know I'm still thinking about our conversation. All of them. All of you." I read it lying in bed, smiling like an idiot at my phone, and I realized something. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I wasn't afraid of what comes next. I'm not naive enough to think it's going to be perfect. Relationships aren't built on single conversations or perfect first kisses. They're built on showing up, on continuing to choose vulnerability, even when it's terrifying, on doing the hard work of being seen and seeing someone else. But here's the thing, I want to do that work. With him. Because he thinks about our conversations. Because he sees me and doesn't look away. Because when I'm with him, I don't feel like I'm performing. I feel like I'm finally actually living. We're getting coffee again tomorrow, Tuesday, 10:15, our usual time. Except now it's not just a coincidence or a routine. It's a choice. He's choosing to show up, and I'm choosing to show up, and we're both choosing to see where this goes when two people decide to stop hiding. I don't know what happens next. Maybe this becomes something big, something that changes both our lives. Maybe it stays small and sweet and simple. Maybe it ends, because sometimes things end even when you don't want them to. But right now, in this moment, I'm choosing to believe in the possibility of it. I'm choosing to believe that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone think about you all week and then tell you about it, and then see what you build together from there. So, yeah, he said, He thought about our conversation all week, and I've been thinking about him, about us, about what it means to finally stop performing and start living. And tomorrow, when I see him in that coffee shop, I'm going to keep choosing this, choosing him, choosing the terrifying, beautiful possibility of being truly known. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? Not just romance or attraction or even love, though maybe it's becoming that too. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be brave, someone who thinks about you when you're not there, someone who sees all the parts of you that you usually hide and says, yes, this, more of this. I'm ready for more of this, more of him, more of us, more of whatever we're building together, one honest conversation at a time.